Welcome. So I'm here today to help you guys to understand what the GAMSAT's about and exactly what you need to do to get in. Elise, I love Elise, she's a nurse. It really goes into depth of how to quickly gain a substantive understanding of the passage's characters, themes and ideas, which is awesome. This is for people like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get into medicine because this is my dream and I want my children to be able to say daddy or mummy is going to a hospital today to help save lives.
I'm Thomas Forfer. I'm, I guess you could say, a retired doctor now. I was a doctor, decided not to do it anymore. Decided to go into entrepreneurship, which means when I started medical school, I started an online education company, and I've been running it ever since. And after working as a doctor, I decided I didn't want to do that anymore, and I moved over to business, and I've been doing that ever since. There are two main things that make a good doctor. I think there's the person-to-person aspect, the ability of a doctor to connect with, understand, talk to, and make people feel at ease or help them through whatever they're going through. It's the human connection aspect. And there's also the intellectual, learn the thing, solve the problem, make the diagnosis side of things as well. And bringing those two together is rare, but when someone's able to do that, I think that makes a really great doctor. I grew up in a family of doctors. My mum, my dad, uncle, grandfather, many different doctors. So I was always kind of hanging around, and it was always something in the background that was a possibility, that it was quite frequently done. But then going through high school, I thought, you know what, I didn't really want to do this. I wasn't quite ready for it at the time. And so leaving high school, it wasn't something that I was thinking of doing. But then I didn't really know what I was going to do, to be honest. And so I went to uni and I did commerce and psychology. And towards the end of my degree, I thought, okay, I need to go. At the time I was in California doing an exchange program. And I was thinking to myself, you know, I need to go back home and I need to get a job. And my majors, one was in finance, the other one was in psychology. And I thought, I don't want to work in finance because I'm just making a few extra dollars every day and not really making any difference. That's how I felt at the time. And the other thing, in psychology, I didn't want to sit around on a couch and listen to people's problems all day. So I thought, that's not what I want to do. I need to do something else. And at the time, I kind of thought about it, and I was thinking 20 years ahead, 30 years ahead, what will I feel satisfied doing? And the answer that I kept coming back to was medicine. Becoming a doctor, where I wasn't just going somewhere and making a few extra bucks and going home like in finance. I was actually making an impact, making a difference in people's lives. Adding a positive, making a positive impact on the world while I was still around. And so at that point, I kind of made that decision. You know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to go for medicine. And kind of when I decide to do something, I just go for it. And it took me a few attempts to get through the examination process. But again, I guess you can throw in grit here as well. I just kept at it and kept going. And ultimately, I got through the exams and the interviews to get in, and I got into medical school. When I decided to do it, I did the usual thing. When you sit for an exam, I looked up what are the perceived, assumed knowledge. Like what do I need to do to do well at this exam? And there were a few science concepts and a few essays that I had to write. So I started practicing a few of those things and learning the science concepts that I had to learn. And I went into the exam, and as I walked out, I knew that I'd messed the whole thing up because the exam was very different to what I'd actually been studying throughout. And I made that connection early on, so that the second time I went for the exam, I knew I was going to go well the first time. And so when I got my result and I didn't get the score that I was hoping for, I wasn't particularly surprised. So I knew that the second time things had to be different, and I didn't feel particularly. I was disappointed, but I kind of saw it coming after that first attempt. So then the second time I knew I had to do things a bit differently, and I started looking around for a different option, a different solution. I did a couple of courses, I talked to different people, and I found a different approach. I talked to a lot of people, in fact, and studied with a lot of people, and I found that there were many different approaches to this one exam, and some of them worked, some didn't, and so I kind of kept track of who did what. And that year my score increased significantly, and enough that I got an interview with my first preference university. So that's the first stage is you do the exam, then you sit the interview, and if you do well on both stages, you get into medical school. And so I did the exam, I did well, so then I went for the interview with the University of Sydney. And at that stage, I had performed many interviews in the past. I had lots of life experience, having lived overseas and worked overseas and worked in different companies and been involved in different things. I thought, okay, I've got a lot of experience, and I'd just beaten this exam when all my friends didn't. So I went in there kind of feeling really bulletproof and on top of the world, and I went in there and thinking that it was a sure thing. And when I got my results, it was very different. In fact, I was almost planning for to get in, and the way I found out was when I came home, Marie checked my emails before me, and it was sent as an email, and I just knew by the look on her face that I hadn't gotten in. And I looked at the email, and I was just shocked and just dumbfounded by the fact that they met me, and they said, "Nah, not you." So it was a big hit to my kind of motivations and wants to pursue this. If they met me and said that no, then maybe there's something wrong with me. There's all these questions that go through your mind when you kind of mess up something that's so important.
Do you think that those, if you've already articulated what you thought the qualities are that makes a good doctor, and perhaps you look through exposure of your parents and family of being in medicine, that you thought you might possess those qualities, and then if you don't get through, therefore that means that other people don't see you as having those attributes that you covet yourself?
Yeah, I hadn't had articulated the qualities of a good doctor that well. But when you go through that interview, they don't give you any feedback. They don't say, oh, you did well on this or you didn't do well on that. So it's pretty much a guessing game as to what you did well, what you didn't do well. So it was really hard to tell, but I just knew that I wanted this and I wanted to get in, and I wasn't going to stop at just 2 attempts. And so then after a bit of kind of time to let the emotions pass and let it all sink in, I kind of went at it again. And again went through the exam, got a good score, applied for a different university, got an interview, and this time I approached it very differently, where I wasn't kind of, I knew that I could possibly not get through, and so I didn't focus on that, but I understood that was a possibility, which drove me to prepare more and get better and make sure that I did everything I could. So I spoke to Marie and I did lots of questions. Marie's background is human resource management, so she's interviewed hundreds of people, and so we practiced a lot and got different, learned about different aspects of being a good doctor, the ethical-based scenarios, and so when I went into that interview, it was a very different experience. I think that I was able to communicate my strengths differently, and in the end I ended up getting into that medical school and graduated from there. Yeah, one attempt per year, yeah, so that was over 3 years. Just to sit the exam, it's like, back then it was like $400, now it's up to $500, plus I'm pretty much just sitting around waiting for I need to fill the time with, because the exam is in March, you hear about the results in June, You sit the interview in September, you get told whether you're in or not in November, and then you start in February. So it's a whole year-long process. And if you go through the interview that I told you in November that no, you didn't get in, it takes you a month or so to pick yourself back up and then start it again. So then you've only got 3 months left to prepare, which is actually the minimum amount of time you need to prepare for that exam. But it's a long process to get through. Whether I was sitting for that exam or working in a banking job or as a psychologist, those social structures will still be there, and they'd still be going on with their lives and interacting with me as they were, just a slightly different, where I wasn't working in a bank, I was sitting at my desk studying and hoping to achieve something that was really important to me. And so those 3 years didn't feel like a waste, or, I mean, it took a long time, but ultimately it got me to where I wanted to be. And 3 years seems like a lot, but it's really small in the scheme of 60 years or 50 years in a profession that you want to be in. So if it took me 3, 4, 5 years to get there, I don't see that's a problem if I'm going to spend the next 20 or 40 years doing something that I love. There's heaps of lessons. Well, there's lessons around the actual exam, the actual interview. Then there's the lessons around going for what you want and continuing to go for it despite the obstacles and failures, and because that's life. I think I learnt that lesson earlier on, but that really solidified it for me. I think I learnt it in high school, where I realized that if I applied myself to my studies, that I would get a positive outcome from it. Where I actually put time and effort into something, then there was a result out of it, even though if I wasn't naturally good at it. And so I would, with that and with sports, I would kind of set my mind on a goal and just keep going. But with this exam, getting into medicine, because it was over 3 years, at that stage in my life, when you're, I think I was like 23 from when I was 23 through to 25, 2 to 3 years is a long time. And I learned that out of that, it wasn't just the knowledge, it was the skill of knowing that if I kept going at something, that ultimately I would get there in one way or another.
At what point did you decide you should share that or capitalize not just on getting to become a doctor, which is what you always wanted,
yep,
but also that you kind of figured it out through trying and failing 3
yep,
times, twice until you got through the 3rd time.
Yep.
That you had something to teach.
Yep.
To that, to start asking.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So throughout those 3 years, I studied with different people, because you form study groups and you kind of share knowledge and experience and teach each other different things. And throughout that time studying with different people, I saw that they had different approaches, and some of them worked, some of them did, most of them didn't. So I realized that there were better approaches and things that worked, things that didn't, and I felt like I'd figured out things that worked and was able to systemize and articulate what worked and what didn't a lot better than what others were able to do. And I thought that I'd spent 3 years deep in this exam, and I'd learnt all of these things that it was actually almost like therapy to just put it out onto paper. It was really, really kind of satisfying to do that as well, to write it all down, to structure it, and then I gave it away to people for free, and I got a lot of positive response from that. People liked it, and a lot of people subscribed to it, and so I thought, okay, let's put together a paid version, a more detailed process on how to do that. And again, people liked that, and so I just kept on building on it until 8 years down the track, it's a fully fledged company. Mainly getting in was the main satisfying part, but sharing that, I think it satisfied I think an entrepreneurial side of me as well, and and the want to kind of just get it off my chest, because I felt like it'd be, although it helped me to get in, I felt like it'd be a waste if I didn't do anything with all this knowledge, that I knew that it could help a lot of people, because I'd see a lot of my friends struggling, and I felt like, hey, if they just had this approach, it would make their lives easier. So I thought like it'd be a waste if I didn't share that. And so that's why I gave out the free one, the initial free one, to say, hey, this is everything that I know, in a really simplified way. Here you go, hopefully this helps. He's a surgeon. I looked him up, he's got a book or something. I don't know much about him. I guess medicine does raise a lot of questions. And there are so many different facets and aspects to it. And because when you're doing it, it's not just you're not learning a craft, you're learning about people and life and death and the world and how people deal with trauma and happiness and sadness. And so there is so much to it that's more than just the craft of giving people a tablet or cutting them up or stitching them together again. That I can understand why this particular surgeon is writing about, because then you've got the ethical dilemmas, and with the advent of new technologies which are progressing much more quickly than our moral and ethical kind of understanding. But the questions that were raised for me were mainly around my ability to have a positive impact in the biggest possible way. And I felt that through medicine I was only helping one patient at a time. Where if you're doing a surgery, there's only one patient you could be operating on at any one time. Or if you're seeing a patient, it's only that one. And I felt that was very limiting. And I also saw that the career progression in medicine, it's very structured. It's very much, I like to describe it as a series of hallways, predetermined hallways. You can choose different doors, but the hallways are always predetermined. There's always doors at certain places where you can't make it up as you go yourself. You can make a few choices, but they're all predetermined for you. And I didn't like that restrictive aspect of it, and the hallways that it was leading to, I didn't like, and I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and I didn't want to commit to the next 10, 15 years knowing what was coming in terms of the practicalities of being a doctor, because quite often the idea of being a doctor is different than the practicalities of it. And I saw both, and I understood both, and I talked to a number of people, and I made the decision that, you know, the values that I want to fulfill throughout my life don't have to be fulfilled through medicine. They can be fulfilled through other ways. And these other ways allow me to not only fulfill the values that will be addressed in medicine, but also other values that I have. Well, such as freedom, and be able to be creative and choose what I do and how I do it. Yeah, those are some of those values. Because I feel like in medicine, yeah, you can be creative. There's some of the like, for example, in plastic surgery, you can be quite creative in how you do particular cuts and stitches. But that's it. And you can be creative in kind of writing articles and putting together studies. But to get to that point, that's like 10, 20, 30 years down the track. And along the way, there's a lot of crap that you have to go through, which I didn't want to be going through. And so putting all that together, there was another way for me to fulfill those values. And at that stage in my medical career, I had to choose one or the other. I couldn't have one foot in medicine, one foot in entrepreneurship, because neither of them would go very well. And so I made the decision to go to entrepreneurship, because I felt like that would allow me to have the biggest impact on the world, and also fulfill my own values along the way. Majority of them come in being ignorant as to what needs to be done, like in terms of what needs to be studied, how much, how hard it'll be, how easy it can be if they do it right. So we show them how to address that. Now, how to learn all those. Now we give them all that information, but whether they take it on is, majority of them do. Not everybody does. I think I'd say maybe 70 to 80% of them take it on, or they or probably 80 to 90% learn it, and because some people just don't apply it, some people don't do the lessons, they don't follow through. Majority of them do. And then you've got the people who, are they able to actually apply it? And this comes down to partly being given the right instructions, and also a large part in their ability to take the lessons that they're given and maybe mold them in a way that works for them so that they can apply it and to the end result. And I think that there are people who, for different reasons, don't apply it, the knowledge. Now, whether that's because they're just unable to, or whether they don't believe they can, or whether they don't put in the effort that's required to do it, I don't know. Because I haven't spoken to every single one of them and done like surveys and stuff, but I think that both those factors come in at one stage or another. There are some individuals, just like in medicine, where you can do all of the standard treatments, do all the best surgeries, all the best medications, and they still fall through, and they're not successful. And same goes here as well, where there's some people where you do everything you can to help, you give them all the best techniques all the time, and it still falls through and it doesn't happen. And but that's a small percentage. I think there are definitely factors that will reduce the likelihood of someone leaving. I see that in my friends who went to medical school with, because you've got a mixture of those who love it, who hate it, who love different aspects of it, and definitely things that are important are making sure that they're not always working, be it working in medicine or working outside of medicine. So like for me, I was working in medicine and running a company at the same time, which I was just always on the go. That's not a good way to do it. So having some downtime to rest and have some fun as well is important. But the biggest factor is it's quite easy in medicine to get caught up in the nitty-gritty details and the small problems, or apparently appearingly big problems, but they're quite small in the grand scheme of things. And losing sight of the big picture, where the reason why they're there is to change lives and to focus on the impact that they're making on their patients, and not just the patient, because every patient has probably 3 or 4 family members whose lives they're changing as well. So if a doctor sees 20 patients in a week, they're really changing the lives of some 80 to 100 people. And many doctors lose track of that and get caught up in the daily grind of getting the next job, getting the next degree or qualification, and getting onto a training program and fighting that, and or doing the shifts. And it's the ones that really enjoy what they're doing, where they focus on the things that they like. So one particular friend of ours works in pediatrics and loves trying to work out the blood sugar levels of her patients, working with the parents to try and work out the blood sugar levels, and she really enjoys that and kind of focuses on the things that she loves. While another friend who more so talks about the things that he doesn't like, and gets caught up in the kind of the daily grind and the dissatisfaction of particular aspects of it, and hasn't quite captured the overarching big picture of what he loves about medicine. And I think that having that and focusing on that is a big factor to keeping someone in medicine. Yeah, so I think you're referring to the vomiting one, right? Yeah, that was more about problem solving. So it's linking problem solving, because in this exam, an important skill you need to have is the ability to solve problems, because they'll give you some clues and aspects of this question. They'll give you a whole bunch of information, but then you need to pick out a few key parts of that information to answer the question. And essentially that's what happens in medicine, where you're given lots and lots of information, but you have to pick out the key things. And a great example is when I was working in the emergency department. It was late on a random Wednesday night, and what happens in an emergency department is there's different kinds of patients, different kinds of issues, and a common one is vomiting. So quite often you hear someone vomiting in the background, and you learn to not think too much of it because it's probably someone else's patient, they're being looked after. And there was this one particular night where there was a patient who was just vomiting and vomiting, and I thought nothing of it initially, but he kept on going. Kept on vomiting, and these were really loud, intense vomits, like really gut-wrenching ones. And eventually I thought, this guy's still going. I'm just going to pick in and just have a look, make sure he's okay. And so I pulled the curtain aside and I poked my head in, and there was this guy sitting on the edge of the bed, his legs hanging over the edge, and he'd fallen back, and his arms were splayed out the side, and in his left arm, he was holding a vomit bag, which is just like a plastic bag for vomiting. And as I peeked my head in, he just turned his head to the side. He was too weak to sit up. He just turned his head to the side and projectile vomited this thick green stream of vomit in and around the vomit bag. And when he'd finished, there were 800 mils of vomit in that bag, so almost a litre, which is a huge amount. And as soon as I saw him, I thought, okay, this guy's sick. Something needs to be done. And so I said to the nurse, who's the doctor? We need to let them know that this guy needs some help. And the nurse goes, oh, actually, that's your patient. we forgot to tell you, but we brought him in, and we didn't tell you, but here he is. Go for it. So I'm like, okay, crap, we need to do something. And so at that stage, I could have spent the next 30 minutes asking him all sorts of questions about, what did you eat yesterday? Have you had any seafood or dodgy kebabs? Or have you traveled recently? What's your medical history? It could have gone for ages and it could have gotten worse. So I had to pick out a few key bits of information that would help me to make a decision and to act quickly. So first thing I did was I asked him, how long have you been vomiting like this? Because one time vomit like that, fine, but if he's vomiting all day like that, he's probably lost a lot of fluid. And he said, all day, and this was in the evening. So he'd been vomiting all day, that much, which means that he could have lost so much fluid that his organs are starting to shut down, which is called going into shock. And if that's happening, then that's really serious. So that was enough of the questions. It sounds serious. Well, I mean, the good thing is that he was able to answer my question, but the downside is that he's been vomiting all day. So enough of the questions, then I needed to find out 2 bits of information. So I needed to know his blood pressure, whether there was enough blood circulating through his body, which was okay, and his heart rate, and that was okay as well. So he wasn't in shock yet, but we had some time, but we had to act quickly. So I picked out those 3 key pieces of information, and that allowed me to make a decision. And at that stage, we had to act, and so we put in IV cannulas, we took out blood, we gave him something for the vomiting, and we gave him lots of fluid. And so in that actual exam, like I said, you're going to be given lots of information, and you have to pick up the key things and then act quickly, so to answer the questions, because it's a very, you don't get much time in this exam, so you have to be quite quick, and that's how it relates to medicine. I think, well, I don't know if I've had those, but it's usually when there's high stakes, high emotionally charged moments. I mean, in medicine, you get that every day because people are getting sick or they're crashing and getting unwell. And it also, I mean, it makes for very exciting stories too, because there's lots happening and people don't usually experience that. Like, how often do people go into an emergency department and see projectile vomit? Or, I mean, there's countless stories that I could go through. That's the thing about medicine, that you see things that nobody else does. And in everyday life, I guess you could, things like car accidents and big business decisions or something, I imagine people would get very kind of switched on like that. when there's high stakes and kind of high emotionally charged situations. Yeah, definitely does, and that's why it's important for doctors to kind of take that time to reflect and debrief and rest, and also see the big picture, because you can get caught up in the drama of the moment and think, oh man, I've witnessed 3 deaths in the last week and I haven't been able to do anything about them. I'm crap, I can't do this, and then you just kind of get caught up in that, rather than thinking, okay, they would have died 3 years ago if I wasn't here, but I extended their life for 3 years, and I was a cog in the wheel of leading to the ultimate death, but I slowed it down a bit. Most of it is, yeah. At this stage in our business, there isn't that much highly charged, high stakes, well, at least not at the level that we're playing at for now. In business, there are definitely times where that's important. As you grow, as you're pushing the boundaries of what you're comfortable with, and ultimately that's what happens in medicine too, where if you've done something 1,000 times, you know what's going to happen and you know the decision that's got to be made, so it takes a little of the uncertainty and emotion out of it. But if it's new and you're growing and it's progressing, and then it's all the more kind of animated. If I go back, okay. I don't think so, no. From my discussions with different doctors and individuals, and my understanding of the profession, it wasn't the emotional side, the kind of occasional intense emotional side of things that I didn't like. It was the life, the long-term life of the everyday things you have to do and the life you have to lead, that I felt wasn't allowing me to live to my full potential. And I felt that although it's a very important profession, I felt like I could do more in a different place. And I still feel that way. I mean, maybe it'll change in the future, and if it does, I can go back. There's a few hurdles I have to jump through, but I don't see myself going back. There are many different skills that I learned in medicine that relate to my current life as an entrepreneur and running a business. For example, there's just so many. One of my favorites that I like to teach people or talk to my staff about is the concept of closing the loop. And it was taught to me by one of my registrars, who was like a senior doctor, who was kind of as almost a mentor in my very first term in medicine, where we would, as junior doctors, we would order the X-ray and say, "Hey, I've ordered the X-ray. Wash our hands off the job." But then he would tell us, "Okay, we've opened the loop, and we've pretty much sent out the request, but we haven't got a result from it yet. So we have to call up the X-ray people. When will the X-ray happen? Okay, not today. Okay, tomorrow. So call up tomorrow, make sure it's happening, and keep going until we get it. And so, okay, X-ray's been done. We need to get it reported. Someone needs to report on that X-ray. So call up that person. Just keep going until the loop is closed, where the X-ray is back in our hands. We have the results reported on, and then we can act on it." And so I've told that story and told it to our staff, where if they send out an email about something, they need to follow up on that, and they need to make sure that not only does that person hear about it, but you get a response back from them. With mentors, they can naturally occur, but that's kind of like standing around and fingers crossed, hopefully someone comes along that can help me. So I feel that it's more effective to set up those situations purposefully. So go out and find a mentor, or make sure that you're providing mentorship to people who you want to go to a particular place. Because otherwise it could be years before you find someone who can help you, who's willing to help you. It's better to just go out and either have a couple chats and ask them, or pay for the opportunity to chat to them. But in our business, we like to set up the mentorship kind of scenario. I mean, I guess people come to us for mentorship in a sense as well. So that's this aspect of our training that they seek and they get through it as well. I think definitely that skill is transferable. Whether it transfers or not is a different story, and I think that there are ways to encourage its transfer. So when we look for our staff, we look for people who are really excellent. Well, they might not be excellent. I mean, they might be good at. They need to be good at their job, but might be really fantastic at something else, which shows us that they have the capabilities of being dedicated and really going for something and really getting good at something, and which is a skill in itself. And so now transferring that skill, sometimes you really need to paint the picture for people, really spell it out for them, saying, okay, you know how you went for your grading and you didn't get it the first time, did you stop? No. Okay, why didn't you stop? What kept you going? Okay, so in your studies, when you didn't get the result you wanted, did you stop? Oh, why did you stop? Because in martial arts you didn't. So what keeps you going there but doesn't keep, how can you take that and apply it here? So kind of encouraging them to take that, to kind of take that template and place it somewhere else. And you do that a couple of times and people will just naturally start doing that. But I think for some people it's really important to paint the picture and kind of really connect the dots for them, so that, or help them connect the dots so that they can take those skills, which for them may not seem applicable but really are, and kind of transfer them over.